Welcome back, everyone. No matter where you are, no matter what time it may be, I hope y'all are doing well out there. Every encounter you're about to hear came from someone who walked away from something they weren't meant to survive. These aren't close calls. These aren't strange sightings. I'm talking about the kind of moments where everything inside you knows you're seconds away from being gone. And then, for some reason, you're not. No one understands that kind of experience except the people who's lived it. And every one of these folks has been carrying this weight around for years. Some of them will tell you the creature that spared their life felt curious. Some will say it felt disappointed. Some say it watched them like it was making a decision. But every single person you'll hear from tonight has the same question burned into the back of their mind. Why me? Why did it let me go? And what would have happened if it hadn't? Some are living with the guilt of surviving when they shouldn't have. Some still wake up at night wondering what made the thing stop when it did. Others can't even talk about it without their voice starting to crack. Even after all these years. Some of them don't feel lucky. They feel marked. These encounters did not give them any answers. They just left them with questions that hurt to think about. If you've ever been through something that left a scar no one else can see, something you've survived but never really healed from, then you're going to understand these folks tonight a little too well. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. Legends, lock in, and let's begin. Everyone grab a drink, lock your doors and windows, hit the lights, and let's get started. Hey, Reels. Now, I don't really have any idea of how to structure this or make it sound pretty or easy to read. I'm just going to dump all this out. I'm sorry, and you can do what you want with it. That's the best I can offer. I'm 51 years old. I was 17 back in the summer of 1990 when this happened. We lived in Missouri, rural Missouri. We had a dairy farm, but back then we weren't really milking cows anymore. But the barn was still there, and that's where this happened. What I remember most clear is being on my back in the hayloft, pinned underneath something heavy, and staring up into this face. It was very close, way too close. I could feel its breath. It was hot, and it stank so very bad. Then there was nowhere left to move. I knew, like you know a storm is about to drop a tornado, that if it wanted me dead, I was done. There was no screaming, no fighting. That was it. And then it just did nothing. Okay, let's back up a bit. The barn had a loft with those big square bales my dad still bought for the horses. I'd go up there to smoke cigarettes and get away from everyone, doing things that I knew I shouldn't be doing. My room was right off the kitchen, so there was no privacy in that house at all. Out in the barn, no one could bug me. It was cool that night. I remember the sound of the cicadas being stupid loud. The moon was bright enough I didn't need a flashlight, so I went out there around maybe 11:30, climbed the ladder, and stretched out on the bales of hay with my head propped on my backpack. You know how barns always have some sort of sound? There's always mice or a board creaking and settling. There's always something. It went from that to just dead still. Even outside, I couldn't hear the bugs anymore. At the time, I just noticed it and thought, that's kinda odd, but I didn't get scared. Then I heard the front doors moving, like someone coming inside. They were those big sliding doors on the track, We always left them barely open so air could move through freely. There was this scraping sound followed by a thump, like somebody bigger than me just leaned into one of those doors. I thought for sure it was going to be my dad coming to bust me for smoking. So I mashed the cigarette out in my Coke can and crawled closer to the edge to look down. I was already rehearsing the argument in my head. There was nothing at the doors. What I did see was the horses, both of them, pressed all the way into the farthest stall together. They were facing away from me, heads almost in the corner, tails flicking like they were fighting flies, but their bodies were stiff. You know how a horse looks when it's locked up. That's what was happening. And at that moment is when I got the feeling that you get when you walk into a room and someone's been talking about you. That something's off feeling. There was a ladder up to the loft and then just floor. If something came up that ladder, there wasn't anywhere to go except the window on the opposite wall, and that window was too small for me to fit through. Well, very fast, anyway. I started to slowly ease back, away from the edge, thinking maybe some type of wildlife had slipped in and I just didn't see it. My heart was going at this moment, but I still wasn't thinking about a monster or whatever. Then the ladder shook. This wasn't a creak or a shuffle, a full rattle like someone big put some weight on the bottom rung. I just couldn't do anything, so I froze right there on the spot, on my hands and knees, and watched the top of the ladder, waiting for whatever was coming to appear. No matter what my head was telling me, I would have never been prepared for what was about to happen. The loft floor would dip just a little every time something heavy went up that ladder. I'd done it with hay bales, and you could feel it. It did that. The boards under me gave this tiny bow. That's how I knew for certain, without any doubt, someone was coming up. And it sure wasn't my dad. He had a bad knee and he didn't move that quick. I backed up until my shoulders bumped the stacks of hay behind me. I remember the hay scratching the back of my neck because I was sweating and it stuck to me. I stayed low. I don't know why, I just didn't want to stand up and make myself a bigger target. What pulled into view first wasn't a hand, it was, I don't know, a paw, I guess. But it was not normal, it was wrong, in many different ways. It hooked over the top of the loft floor. It had pads like a dog, but it was longer, almost like fingers. There were claws, but they weren't curved like a cat. They were more straight, like thick black nails that had been filed down to a point. I had lost control of my bodily functions. I had already started tearing up and crying before I even saw the rest of this thing. This head comes up over the edge, and the only way I can describe it is if you shaved a wolf and stuck the skin back on too tight. The snout wasn't crazy long, but it jutted out enough there was no mistaking it. The ears were up, but they were pinned sideways like it was annoyed. I could see the shine of its teeth, even with its mouth mostly closed. Its eyes were dark, but there was a shine like oil caught in a flashlight beam. They were focused, not looking around, not sniffing. It was looking dead at me. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move. All I could do in my head was think, I'm dead. That's it. No one's even going to find me until the morning. It hauled the rest of itself up in one smooth motion. A big grunt. Just up there. It was bigger than any man I've ever seen. The ceiling in that loft was low, and it had to hunch its shoulders forward. It started towards me on two legs. I remember every step because the boards pushed down, and I could feel that through the bales. Then I was hit with a smell. Wet fur, but also something metallic and sour like old blood. When it got close enough, it lowered itself down almost like it was going to crawl. Now it was on all fours, but the way the shoulders moved wasn't right for a normal animal. It came right up until its face was maybe 2 feet above mine. That's where I flash back to the start of this email. I was on my back by then. I'd given up. I don't remember consciously laying down. I was just suddenly there. Its front paw/hand was on my chest, pressing me into the hay. It wasn't pressing down hard enough to crush me, it was just holding me there, so I couldn't move. Those claws pricked through my shirt without breaking skin. It leaned in and it sniffed once. A slow sniff. I could feel the air move over my cheek and into my ear. My whole body was shaking, but I couldn't move anything but my eyes. No one believes any of this when I tell it, but I don't really care. Its expression changed at this point. At first it looked angry, or at least keyed up. Its eyes were wide, lips pulled back a little, then, while it was staring right into my face, it did this tiny head tilt like a person hearing something off in the distance and rethinking their plan. I felt the pressure on my chest ease up. It made this low sound. Not a growl, not what I would call a growl, more like when a big dog lets air out through its nose. You know that sound. I swear to you, it felt like it was making a decision in real time. I don't know if this was a thought in my head or a voice. It's so weird to think back on this. But in my head, clear as day, I had this thought. It's gonna let me go. It's not going to hurt me. It pushed off me, turned away, and went back to the ladder. The floor moved under it again. I heard the rungs creak in quiet little movements as it went down a lot faster than it came up. I just laid there for a long time after it was gone. When I finally got enough bravery to crawl to the edge and look down, the horses were still jammed in the corner. One of them had foamed up around the bit, and they both stank from sweat. And they weren't the only ones, as I just noticed the entire front of my pants were soaked with urine. I hadn't even noticed when it happened. Here's the thing, man. I know in my bones I should be dead. It wasn't far away. It wasn't out in a field. It was right there on top of me. It had its hand on my chest and could have torn me open like I was nothing. It just didn't. I left Missouri 5 years after that, joined the Army, then moved to Iowa with my wife. I still won't have so much as a deer head mounted in my house. I don't do barns. I don't sleep on my back. If my dog stands at the window and stares at nothing, I have to leave the room. I don't know for sure or have an opinion on what these things are. Dogman, I don't think they're a werewolf because I think they stay what they are constantly. They don't shapeshift. It could be some throwback creature that just don't belong here, that has been here but no one's discovered it. I don't care what label or what name people want to slap on it. All I know is it looked me dead in the eye, held me down, and then made a choice that I'll never be able to understand. I'm only alive because it chose to let me be. I think about that every night before I fall asleep, and I imagine I will for the rest of my life. Thank you for reading this. Jay. Hi there, Reels. You can call me Lauren, just please don't use my real last name if you read this on your channel. I still live in the same town, and I don't need people looking at me weird every time I go to the grocery store. This happened in 2014 in a little place called Cross Lanes, West Virginia, just outside of Charleston. I was 29 at the time, working at a pharmacy. I didn't drive back then because we only had one car and my husband used it for his job. So most nights, I could walk home. Now, before anyone gets mad at my husband, my house wasn't that far. I enjoyed walking. It was maybe a 15-minute walk. It was a busy enough area that I never really felt unsafe, but no, not city life either. The houses with yards, there was patches of woods between each of them. That's the picture I can paint for you. I want to start with the part nobody sees because that's what still bothers me more than the actual sighting itself. I should be dead. I know that sounds dramatic, but if you look at the layout of where this happened, and how it moved, and where I was, there's no other way I see it. There wasn't a soul out there to help me. No open stores, there was no traffic on the roads. It was just me and it decided not to finish what it started. Okay, the night. I got off work around 9 p.m. on a Thursday. It was late October, cold enough for a jacket, but it wasn't freezing out. There had been one of those light drizzles earlier, so everything was wet. I remember already being in a bad mood. My boss had kept me over to do some extra work, and some guy in the line made a comment about my weight. Stupid little things that pile up over time. I put my earbuds in like I always did, but I only had one in because my husband is always griping about situational awareness. He grew up in Boone County. He's used to rougher areas than I am. The first stretch was just sidewalk along the main road. Street lights around me, some cars here and there. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing to raise any alarms. I didn't get that watched feeling or anything then. But all that changed as soon as I turned off onto the side street. This road cut behind the backs of a few neighborhoods. On one side of me there were houses set back a bit from the road. On the other side there was a strip of woods and then a small creek. There was no lights back there, just dark, trees, and the sound of water when it rained decent. About halfway down that road I noticed I couldn't hear any night noises from the wooded side. There's usually something. Crickets, frogs, whatever. It just felt kind of hollow. At the same time, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And yes, I know that sounds very cliché, but that's literally the physical reaction I had. My body knew before I did myself. I paused my music, but left the earbud in. I didn't want whoever might be watching to know I was on to their presence. I kept walking, but a bit slower, and I really listened. There was a sound behind me off to my right. At first I thought it was just water in the ditch along the road. It was a sort of sloshing sound. Then it didn't match my steps, and it didn't match the rhythm of a stream either. It was like something moving through wet leaves just inside the trees, keeping up with me. I just told myself it was a deer. A deer would do that out of curiosity. I tried to test that theory. I stopped walking completely. The sound stopped with me. I started again, and so did it. I could feel my throat tightening up and my eyes starting to water. I wasn't crying, I was just feeling that rush you get when adrenaline hits hard. I didn't want whoever or whatever it was to know I was scared yet. There was one street light on that road that always flickered. I remember looking ahead and seeing it and thinking, if I can just make it under that light, I'll be okay. That was stupid, but that's where my mind went at the time. As I got closer to that light, the thing in the woods got closer to the edge. I could hear it breathing at this point. It was a heavier sound than what a person would make walking. I should have crossed the road, away from it, but I didn't want to step closer to the woods, even to cross. So I just stayed on the same side, pretending like nothing was wrong. When I was maybe 10 or so yards from the streetlight, it stepped out of the trees. I didn't get a blurry glimpse or a half shadow. It walked right out of the dark and stopped at the edge of the pavement, like it was using the road as a boundary line. It was tall. That's the first thing. Really tall. I've never seen a person even close to this big. The light hit it from above and a little behind, so most of it was in shadow, but the shape was very clear. It had a narrow waist and these wide shoulders that made it look weird, like it was almost fake, like something that should walk on all fours but was standing up anyway. The head was what you'd expect if someone said wolf, but again, supersized, huge. The snout wasn't long like a cartoon. It was blunt, thick. One ear looked torn at the tip. I could see the outline of it against the light. And it did have hands up front on the, what I would call arms, because legs don't have hands. They were hanging down low, directly at its sides, like limber noodles. I could see its fingers moving. There was fur all over, but shorter hair on the arms. It wasn't some guy in a mask. The way the muscles moved under its skin when it moved, its weight wasn't something you could fake. We just stood there, looking at each other. I was close enough that if it took 3 steps, it would have been on me. I didn't even think about running. It was too close to even bother. My legs wouldn't have done it anyway. We were angled so that the only thing between us was maybe half a driveway's width of space. I remember thinking, at that moment, this is it. This is how it happens. My husband is going to be a widower, and no one is going to believe what he tells them. Or worse, no one will even know because I'll never be found. It lowered its head down just a little, like it was smelling something. It was just watching me, standing there like a statue. I don't even know how long this went on for, but it felt like 10 minutes, but it was probably well under a minute. It did something next when it took a step back. It was just one step. It was enough that it wasn't on the pavement anymore. It was just standing half in the ditch and half in the brush. It looked away from me, down the road toward my house, and then looked back at me again. If that was a person, I would say they were telling me, go home. And that's exactly what it felt like. Permission. I walked. I didn't run. I didn't look away from it until I had to, so I didn't trip. I just moved forward like someone trying not to spook a dog. It stayed right where it was. When I got to the next intersection and finally forced myself to turn around, it was gone. I don't mean I saw it go back in. I mean there was just nothing there. The trees were still, and the night noises started back up again. I made it home, and my husband said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. All I could manage to tell him was that a big dog scared me near the road. I didn't tell him the truth until a year later. For anyone that hasn't had your own encounter and you feel this is wrong to not tell your loved ones or your close relatives, this is a lot harder to talk about than what you would think. You wouldn't understand unless you've had an encounter yourself. Since that, my life is technically fine. We had another kid, I still work at the same place. I still walk sometimes, but I'll take a different route, and I hate every second of it. The part that keeps me wondering through the years is if this thing wanted me, if it was as evil as people say, or aggressive, I would have been done. There was no one around, no cameras, no traffic. It could have taken me easily into the trees, and that would have been that. Instead, it stepped aside and let me pass. I can't tell if that was mercy, boredom, or something else. I don't even know which answer would bother me more. All I know is I feel like I'm living on borrowed time now, from a thing that shouldn't exist in the first place. Much love, Reels. Lauren, West Virginia. Reels. Let me skip all the intro stuff and formalities and get straight to it, because this is the second or third time I've tried writing this, and I'm not happy with either one. I'm just going to send this one, even if it sounds like a mess. I live in northern Minnesota now, but this happened when I was 14, back when we lived in eastern Kentucky. I'm 38 now, if anyone cares. This was out near Jackson. I'm not sending this to tell you about some cool encounter. I'm sending this because I feel like someone needs to hear it. My little brother had no idea how close he was to dying that night, and I'm the only one who saw it, and I don't know why it focused on me instead of him. So this doesn't start in the woods, it starts in my basement. My wife asked me why I never let our kids camp out in the backyard. That seems like a nothing question, right? People do that all the time. But when she said it, I had a full-blown panic attack. I couldn't breathe. My ears started ringing. The whole 9 yards. She thought something was physically wrong with me. I ended up blurting out, "I'm not doing that again. I'm not watching another kid almost get taken, especially mine." She had no idea what I was talking about or what I meant, so I had to finally tell her what I'm about to tell you. We grew up on a narrow dirt road with maybe 5 houses on it. Behind our house there was a strip of woods and then a steep hill going up. We didn't own much land, but as kids, you just treat all the woods like your playground. My brother, we'll just call him Kyle, is 3 years younger than me. I know you said in a video you don't like that names are used. I'm just telling you his real name, but I'd like for you to change it if you do read this. He was the one who always wanted to camp. I liked it, okay, I guess, but I was more into video games even back then. He begged our mom to let us camp out one Friday night in the backyard. She said fine, as long as we stayed inside the fence and kept the house door unlocked. We set the tent up near the back fence. You could see the woods if you unzipped the door and leaned out. It felt wild enough for him and close enough for me that I wasn't nervous. The night goes on. We were playing cards, flashlights. I remember it was one of those big yellow flashlights with the square battery you clip on it. At some point we both fell asleep, with the light still on, shining at the tent wall. Here's where the order of things gets muddled because of how my brain remembers all this. I woke up because I thought someone said my name. It wasn't loud, it was like hearing your name in a crowd and you're not sure if it was real or not. I opened my eyes and the tent was lit up from the flashlight still going, but it was dimmer now due to the battery getting low. The first thing I noticed was that my brother wasn't next to me. He had been on my left, crammed into a sleeping bag that was too small. Now there was just this dent in the blanket where he had been. I sat up, looked around inside the tent, and he wasn't there. He wasn't anywhere. I could see the zipper was open at the bottom, just a few inches, enough for a kid to wiggle out if he really wanted to. I did not immediately go to Bigfoot or some type of monster in the woods. I thought the little idiot went inside to get a snack and left the zipper open. I leaned toward the flap to look out. and that's when I saw a shadow pass across the tent wall. It didn't walk by, more like something very big had just moved outside. The fabric even puffed inward a bit, like the air had shifted. I turned the flashlight off without really thinking about it. Instinct, I guess. It got very, very quiet. We had neighbors with dogs. They barked at everything. You could usually hear at least one somewhere. That night, there was no barking. There was no cars. I heard no bugs. And no dogs. Just my own breathing. I crawled to the flap and moved it just enough to look out with one eye. My brother was sitting by the fence with his back to me. He was cross-legged in his pajamas, hugging his knees. He was looking up toward the woods like he was listening to someone talk. That alone would have been weird enough. But then I saw what he was looking at. Right at the fence line, just on the other side, there was this shape. It was hunched down, almost like it was crouching to get closer to his height. I couldn't see all of it because the tent partly blocked my view, but I could see the upper half well enough. If you took a big German shepherd and stretched it upright, that's the closest I've got. The head had the same angled forehead and the long muzzle. The rest of it it was Dogman. There's nothing else to say. The shoulders were really thick. The arms were really long. It had one arm on the top rail of the fence like a person leaning on a countertop. Its hand was hanging down on our side of the fence. The hand is what really caught my attention at that moment because it was hanging over. It had the longest fingers I've ever seen, and they looked like they had dark nails at the end. They tapped on the wood rail like it was impatient, and like I said, that's what caught my attention. This thing was behaving like a person. My brother was maybe 6 feet away from this thing, completely relaxed. I couldn't hear it make any noises, but his head was tilted like he was listening to someone too far away for me to hear. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to call for our dad, throw something, anything. Instead, I just laid there with my hand over my mouth, watching this unfold. The thing turned its head and looked straight at the tent. It wasn't like it heard me. It was more like it already knew I was awake and was waiting for me to realize it. The eyes didn't glow the way I've heard other people talk about them. They just reflected the light like a normal animal from the house behind us. It did make them stand out, though, the color. They were definitely an amber golden color, and they were too far apart for a person, and too level for a regular dog. After staring at it for a while, it did something that I've heard before, but it sounds so dumb and fake, honestly. It looked at me and smiled. Not all the way, not like some cartoon villain. It just pulled its lips back enough that I could see the line of teeth. They were big and sharp and flat all at once. It was a I know something you don't kind of look. It straightened up a little and took its hand off the fence and stepped back into the darker part of the yard where our porch light couldn't reach. My brother snapped out of whatever trance he was in and turned his head like he'd just woken up. He looked around, confused, then back at the spot where it had been standing, then at the tent. "Why did you call me?" he asked. I hadn't said his name not once. I played it off. I said, "You scared me. Get back in here." My voice came out higher than I wanted, but he didn't notice. He crawled back in, zipped the flap all the way this time, and laid down like nothing had even happened. He was asleep again in under a minute. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I still can't sleep to this day. I kept expecting claws to come ripping through the side of the tent, or the fence to crack or break open and that thing charge, but nothing else happened. The next morning our dad joked that we were real mountain men now for making it all night outside. I almost threw up when he said that. Here's where the "I survived but shouldn't have" part comes in for me. It wasn't after us in the tent. It was after my brother. He was the one out there in easy reach. It could have stepped over that fence like it was nothing. It could have grabbed him by the neck and dragged him off, and that would have been that. No one would have found him. Instead, for some reason, it looked at me, not him. Me. It's like it wanted me to know, like it was letting me watch on purpose. Then it just let him go. Let him walk back into the tent like nothing was wrong. What would you even call that? Mockery? A warning? I call it sick. I call it demented. I call it evil. I've carried this for 24 years. My brother doesn't even remember anything except I had to pee and I think I went inside, but maybe I dreamed that part. That's what he said when I tried to bring it up once. I'm kind of thankful that he doesn't remember it. My kids ask to camp in the yard and I say no. My wife thinks I'm just overprotective. Maybe I am. But I've seen what stands at the fence line when you're not looking. It could have taken my brother, and didn't. It left him there and left me with the memory of all this nightmare. I don't know which one of us got the worst end of the deal, to be honest. T. Hello, son. I don't know how well this will read. I can't really see to type very well on these tiny little phones. But my granddaughter showed me your channel and said, "Papaw, you ought to tell that thing you told me." So I'm going to try. My name don't matter. I'm 78 years old, born and raised in western North Carolina foothills outside a place called Robbinsville. If you do read this, don't bother changing my age. Folks around here know how old I am anyway. I'm too old to care much about anything. I'm writing this because I should have died in 1997. I ain't being dramatic. I mean it plain. Something had me dead to rights, and it decided not to finish me. I don't know why. I've been thinking on that very question for almost 30 years now. Let me just say it this way. I don't believe in dogmen. I don't believe in werewolves. Any of that. But I know what I saw, and I know what put its hand on me. I know what breathed on my face, and I know damn sure it wasn't a bear. I'll just tell it to you, how it comes out of my head. Back then, my wife was still alive, God rest her soul. I used to do volunteer work over at our church, fixing things mostly, gutters, broken doors. One night, Pastor Jackson called me up around 9:30, saying the alarm was going off again. We had a motion thing on the back door and raccoons kept messing with it. I took my old truck and drove up there. It was cold as a witch's heart, one of them late November nights where the frost is already on the grass before midnight. The moon was bright enough you could see your breath like smoke. The church sat on a little knoll with woods behind it, real old trees. This was an old forest. I always hated walking back there at night because the dark has weight to it behind that building. It's hard to explain unless you've lived around these mountains your whole life. It's like the nighttime watches you. Anyway, I parked, unlocked the back door, and checked the hallway. Nothing. There was no broken window, no raccoons inside. Then I heard the dumpster lid slam. That dumpster sat maybe 30 yards behind the building near the trees. I immediately went to, "There's a bear outside." We had one big male that wandered around sometimes. I didn't want it tearing the lid clean off, so I went around the building and shined my mag light toward it. I didn't see a bear. I didn't see anything, as a matter of fact. But the woods behind that dumpster, everything was too still, too quiet, and that put me on edge because I'm not an idiot. My hearing's been getting bad these last 10 years. But back then it was pretty sharp. And that night, I heard nothing. Not even the sound of the branches clicking together in the wind. It was completely the very definition of dead quiet. I started hearing footsteps. Not on the leaves, on the gravel behind me. I turned around quick, and that light hit something taller than any person or animal I've ever known. It was standing right where the church's back wall meets the grass, like it had been pressed against the building. It was at least 9 feet tall, every bit of it. Its eyes were almost white with a blue tinge to them. They were lower down and spaced far apart. It's very weird to try and describe this from the picture I see in my mind. And the head, Lord, the head it had a long snout, yes, but not like a wolf. It was more blocky, more shaped, like it wasn't made for walking on all 4 legs its whole life. The ears were pointed but turned sideways, not completely straight up. It didn't flinch when the light hit it. It never blinked once. It didn't move like it cared at all that I could see it. I watched it for a second, and it just made its way back. I took a step back and slipped on the frost. Fell right on my rear end. The light rolled out of my hand, and I scrambled to grab it, but I felt something grab the back of my neck. It grabbed my neck and my coat partially, and it just lifted me up. Not off the ground, just enough to keep me from crawling away. I'm not ashamed to say I begged out loud. Lord, help me, please. Don't let this thing hurt me. I ain't cried since my wife passed, but that night, I did. It pulled me back slow, not dragging me, it was almost gentle, which somehow seemed more odd. Something that big shouldn't be gentle. When I turned to face it, my knees buckled. My legs just quit. I was an old man then, but not useless. My body, it gave out, like my spine had turned into dust. It crouched down in front of me, very slowly, very quietly. It put its hand on my chest. 4 long fingers and a thumb, hair on the back, skin like leather. The nails were curved and cracked like it walked on them sometimes. But the palm was soft, warm. I could feel each finger through my coat. It pressed down barely, like it was checking something. The breath from its nose hit my chin, and it smelled like copper, maybe blood. It leaned its face close enough that I felt the heat of it on my neck. I thought, this is the part where my name ends up etched on a stone behind this very church. But it didn't bite. It didn't claw. It didn't crush me. Instead, it just cocked its head like a dog. And then it clicked its teeth together a few times like a little popping sound. It sniffed my cheek. And I'll swear before God himself, when it sniffed me, a sound came out of its throat like a human. It was like it was thinking, processing, deciding. Then its hand slid off my chest. I fell backward onto the gravel. My flashlight rolled right under it and hit its foot. It didn't even react. It stood up, taller than the gutter line, and walked back up toward the woods. It walked on 2 legs, steps slow like it wasn't trying to rush. Before it stepped off into the woods, it looked over its shoulder at me one last time. I know this part'll sound strange, but I'll say it anyway. It looked disappointed. Disappointed in me for being so scared, or weak, or old, or something I can't name. Like I failed some sort of test. Then it was gone. Just gone. I sat there on the ground until my fingers went numb from the frost. I didn't move until the sun started coming up on the ridge. I told the pastor a bear had nearly killed me. Told my wife I slipped on ice running from the bear. I told everyone else nothing. What am I supposed to say? That thing didn't kill me because it didn't feel like it? I'm old now, too old for lying to anyone or myself. I know what happened. I know what touched me. And I know I didn't survive because I was brave or smart. I survived because it decided an old man wasn't worth the trouble. I ain't afraid of dying anymore. But I think about that night every single time I lay flat on my back. I can still feel those fingers through my coat. If you read this, make folks understand that this isn't a joke. Some things out there aren't hungry. Some things just want to look you in the eyes, check into your soul before they let you walk away. Grandpa H. Hello, Reels. I'm writing this at like 1:40 in the morning, and I'm probably going to regret sending it, but I keep pacing around my apartment thinking about it, listening to your channel, and honestly it feels like I'm going to go crazy holding it in. This isn't some old memory from childhood or some deep trauma I've suppressed for 20 years. This happened last year, the summer of 2024, outside of Palestine, Texas. My sister and her fiancé went to Cancun for a week and asked me to house sit, watch the dogs, water the plants, bring in packages, all that boring crap. I said sure, why not? I had no clue what I was walking into. Let me paint the layout real quick. They're country people, but not like ranchers or farmers, more like they wanted the quiet but didn't realize how isolating it actually is. Their house is at the end of a long dirt driveway surrounded by maybe 6 or 7 acres of mixed woods. The nearest neighbor is far enough that if you screamed, they wouldn't have a chance of hearing you. There's 2 dogs, a golden retriever named Moose and a mixed dog named Penny. Both are sweet dogs, and both are loud when anyone pulls in. The first 2 days were quiet and normal. Day 3 is when I started noticing weird stuff. Things were just feeling different. For instance, Moose kept staring out the back patio door with his ears pinned. He wasn't barking or whining, he would just stare off into the distance. Penny wouldn't go outside by herself after dark. She'd do that stiff-legged walk and then back up like, nope, not happening. I just figured coyotes. I'm scared of coyotes. I imagine the dogs are as well. Texas is full of them, too. Anyway, I was sleeping in the guest room. The window faces the woods. Around midnight that 3rd night, I woke up because I heard something walking in the gravel, crunching outside. It was a sound that reminded me of someone walking right up the driveway and then stopping. The dogs weren't barking, though. That confused me. I laid there listening so hard my jaw clenched up. Nothing else happened, so I figured maybe I'd dreamed it. The next night is when this actually becomes something. It was raining around 10 o'clock. It wasn't storming, just a steady drizzle. I let the dogs out to pee before bed. Moose ran out, did his thing, and came back. Penny stepped out, froze, and then bolted back into the kitchen, tail between her legs. This is the part I should have taken serious. Moose stood in the doorway, whining, but he wouldn't step off the concrete patio. He kept staring into the dark like something was standing just outside the light, where I couldn't see it. I tried my best to go to bed, but I just could not relax. I ended up sitting in the living room scrolling on my phone until around 1 a.m. The dogs, out of nowhere, both stood up at the exact same time. They didn't bark or whine like before. They just stood up and stared at the front door like they were waiting for it to get kicked in. I just muted everything, put my phone down. I could hear something outside. It wasn't footsteps. It was something else. It sounded like someone had made their way onto the porch. As soon as I heard it and started listening, everything went still and quiet. I thought maybe a deer had wandered up because my sister has a porch light on a motion sensor, so I went to flip the switch to turn it on manually. Before I even touched that switch, the dogs both backed away from the door. You know that cold, numb feeling where your hands feel far away from your body? That washed over me so fast I felt lightheaded. I didn't turn the porch light on. I don't know why. Something just told me not to. I just suddenly felt like lighting up the porch was the wrong thing to do. A minute later, the doorknob made a sound. It didn't turn, it didn't rattle. Something just touched it, ever so slightly. It looked to me like someone just rested their hand on it from the outside. Moose started shaking so hard that his collar was jingling. Penny crawled under the coffee table and would not come out. I walked closer to the door and whispered, "Who's there?" like a complete moron. I moved maybe 2 steps closer to the window beside the front door and pulled the curtain just a bit back so I could see the porch. Someone or something was standing too close to the door for me to see anything but a shape. A very tall, very wide shape. I thought it was a huge guy. A trespasser, a drunk neighbor, a prank, anything. Then it leaned, just leaned a little, and its head on my father's grave passed into the light from inside the house. It wasn't human at all. The snout, it was long and thick, but something made for biting straight down, not tearing sideways. The fur was soaked with rain, and I saw water drip from the ends of its snout onto the porch. Its ears were laid flat against its skull, not back like a scared dog, flat like something that's pissed off. I jerked the curtain closed without meaning to. My whole arm just reacted. It didn't knock, it didn't leave, it didn't do anything. I finally heard this slow huff, loud exhale through the door. I backed up until I hit the coffee table. The dogs were basically plastered against me. I called my sister's fiancé and got no answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. Then, and this is the part I know you will understand, Reels, the house got quiet, like insulated, suffocating quiet, the kind where you feel pressure on the inside of your ears. Then I heard nails, big ones. It was dragging them down the side of the house. Slow, measured. I don't think it was trying to get in, it was just trying to scare the hell out of me. I wanted to call 911, but what was I going to say? Ah, yes, there's a large dog, man thing rubbing its claws on the outside of the house. Please hurry. So I just froze and waited. For how long, I couldn't tell you. It felt like an hour, but it was most likely around 10 minutes. Eventually, all the sounds faded. Then the dog suddenly relaxed. Moose shook himself off and whimpered to go out the back door, the opposite side of the house. I didn't let him. I didn't want anything to happen to the dogs. I didn't sleep that night at all. The next morning, I found these weird prints in the mud near the front steps. I didn't take pictures. I didn't want proof because I didn't want anyone convincing me it was a bear or stray dog or whatever. I just didn't want to argue with people on these are fake or that's not what you saw. Do not tell me what I saw. I know what I looked at. You weren't there. I was. Don't tell me what I did see and what I didn't. And this is the craziest thing to me. Whatever that was, it could have come through that front door like it was made of cardboard. It could have busted the window. It could have hit the back door. It could have grabbed one of the dogs through the window. It could have circled around and waited for me to go out in the daytime. It didn't. It left. Just left. Like it wasn't hungry. It wasn't there for food.
like it wasn't the point. I never told my sister. She wouldn't have believed me anyway. She'd say it was a bear or a guy messing around the property and I should have called the cops, and maybe so. The part about me calling the cops, maybe so, not the guy messing around. This was not a person. It was too big. Bears don't stand upright at my damn eye level. It just don't happen. And men don't have heads shaped like a wolf. I don't care if people call me crazy. I know I should have been dead that night, and I can't figure out why I'm not. If you read this, you don't have to change much. Just don't use my real name, and don't tell people where the house is. I'm not going back there anyway, ever. See. Friends, legends, family. That's gonna do it for this one. You know, I don't really know the right way to wrap something like this up, because these stories don't leave you with answers, they just leave you with a cold, quiet thought. Some people only survive because something they still don't understand allowed them to. That's not the kind of thing you celebrate. That's the kind of thing that just sits in your chest and eats at you for years. It makes you question the world a little differently. Makes you question yourself a little differently. And the people who shared these encounters tonight, they weren't trying to scare anyone. They weren't trying to unload something they couldn't carry by themselves anymore. Something that's followed them through marriages, children, deaths, new homes, new lives, and still refuses to let them go. So to each of you who trusted me with your encounters, thank you. I know what it costs to open up about something that dark, and I hope somewhere in all of this, you found a little relief in letting it out. To everyone listening, if you've ever walked away from a moment that should have ended you, if you still have nights where you lie awake wondering why you're here, you're not broken. You're not imagining it. You're not the only one who feels that weight. You're not alone. Not tonight. If you want to hear more encounters like these, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this with someone who might need to know they're not the only person walking around with a scar no one else can see. And to you channel members, you legends, thank you for keeping all this going. You'll never know how much your support means. Take care of yourselves. Hold on to the people you love and hold them close. Whatever's watching out there in the dark, I pray that it keeps its distance. Stay safe out there. I love each and every one of you. Until next time, my friends, watch over your loved ones. Keep your head on a swivel. And as always, good night.